He was our most popular guest ever, and today Mick Foley returns, author of Foley is Good. Mick shoots from the hip as always. He'll tell us what guys really think about The Rock and the truth about Vince McMahon. It's the interview you begged us for. Mick Foley one-on-one next on OTR.
Off the Record with Michael Landsberg is brought to you by the Keg Steakhouse and Bar. For great steaks, good friends, see you tonight.
He was Mankind, Dude Love, and of course he was Cactus Jack. His heroes back in the time, I guess, were Terry Funk and Jimmy Snuka. Now his heroes are Michael Crichton and Danielle Steele, the most complicated, simple guy in the world. Mick Foley. Mick, you made a living wrestling, but the real money, as we know, is in publishing. How bizarre is that? First of all, nice to see you. Have a nice day.
Well, it doesn't seem nice to see me. For a second, I don't know what's going on here. You have the most uncomfortable chairs in the history of talk shows.
It's funny, Mick. I'm finding them fairly roomy.
Well, not for me.
Yeah, well, maybe that was the point.
My butt is protruding through the thing, and you can tell I'm trying to shape up for roller coaster season. I'm cranky, and the only thing you had in the green room were cookies.
I'm just sorry. Is prima donna one word or two?
I'm not asking for much, just a chair that can seat my sizable butt in it, and a table that doesn't jut into my knees. Now I got to cross my legs, and I don't look cool in front of the kids.
See, we thought we could accommodate your butt. It was your attitude that has clearly shocked us.
Okay, well.
All right. Are you okay if we talk about your book?
Sure. What book is that?
That is Foley is Good, and the Real World is Faker Than Wrestling, which follows on the heels of another New York Times bestseller,
Right.
Have a Nice Day.
Yes.
You're okay if we talk about this?
Yeah, I would love to talk about that.
All right. I want to talk to the I Quit match, and I want to talk specifically about The Rock. One of my favorite sections had to do with this very famous match at the Royal Rumble in 1999. The Rock, the biggest star in wrestling right now, and maybe the biggest star in entertainment, period. The Royal Rumble, 1999. That match, you got real hurt by The Rock. I remember watching and thinking, this is not wrestling, this is just a beating. 11 unprotected chair shots, 6 more than was booked. You write that unfortunately The Rock did not pick up on your nonverbal cues. And I want to ask you, does that make sense given the fact that The Rock was not a trained wrestler the way many of you were? He didn't wrestle across the United States in the smaller leagues and jumped right in.
You know what? He didn't just jump right in. He did have some training.
Not much.
He didn't have a lot of in-ring experience, but he had uncommon poise for a guy with that little experience. And I mean, I take as much blame for the way the match turned out as anybody. And really, just one of those things that I thought 5 shots would take us from the middle of the ring up to the ring set where we came out. And really, after 5 shots, I was still in the ring. We only made it halfway up after 11, so it was a slight miscalculation. But there was a time, and I thought I did a real good job of dealing with my feelings. You know, I was sitting in a hotel room in Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia, and I was trying to figure out, for the life of me, I couldn't figure out in one section where he hit me with the chair the first time. And as a matter of pride and as a matter of character, you know, the Mankind or Cactus never went down on one shot. You know, I just didn't do that. And I didn't plan on going down on one shot this night either. And the one shot put me down on my knees, I mean, legit. And while I was trying to get the cobwebs to clear, you know, I was expecting The Rock to really play to the crowd. And all of a sudden it was like, bam, a second one. And it just did something, you know, physically. I never took into account that the arms behind the back and bound tightly with handcuffs would take away my body's ability to kind of give with the shot. And so when that second shot came in, I mean, it was, I can't rationalize my decision to take 3 more right in a row, except to say that he had touched a point deep within me, really angered me, and that was my way of standing up, and it makes no sense.
Now, I want to ask you, is this the future of wrestling, given the fact that you are more entertainment than you ever were?
Right.
In the days of guys being outstanding technical wrestlers, those guys are not as appealing as they once were. Is that the future of wrestling now, guys who may miss verbal cues because, or nonverbal cues, and guys getting hurt because they don't understand the game the way you did and the guys that you grew up with?
No, actually, I think you're being too hard on The Rock, and I'm usually the guy who's too hard on The Rock.
Well, you were hard on The Rock also in your book, and I'll read you a
couple
quote.
times, sure.
This is from your book.
Okay,
I'm
but
not making this stuff up,
No,
right?
but in this point, I think that was a signal, that I Quit match, that no, this is not the way the business should go. And I actually think there is more of a return to the technical wrestling, which is why Chris Benoit is finally getting a push, why Kurt Angle, who, if Kurt is one of the most entertaining guys in the business, but if he couldn't back it up in the ring, he wouldn't be where he is. I think that everybody understood that I Quit went way over the line, and it should never even be approached.
See, here's what I'm wondering. When Vince came out and said it's fake, right? He admitted,
right,
yeah, this is scripted, this is sports entertainment. I think he put a lot of pressure on guys like you to go above and beyond what used to take place. Because when you used to put a guy in an arm bar and he'd be going, no,
Yeah.
some of the audience would actually believe that. But now they know that that isn't real. So you got to go up ladders and you got to fall 25 feet onto tables. Doesn't it put more pressure on you to perform extreme?
I don't know. On the flip side, though, it's also enabled a conversation like this to take place, which I think.
Oh, I'm not saying it's bad, but I think
Yeah.
it pushes you guys to perform above and beyond a certain level.
I don't think so. I think there's a certain amount of guys who get painted into a corner, unfortunately. Someone as talented as Edge and Christian and the Hardy Boys, the Dudleys, if they're not in a TLC match, people don't see it as being.
Yeah, but that was with you, though.
time.
You raised the standard every time. Mick Foley, you were the guy who would do anything in the ring. And when they see Mick do it, they expect the same thing of all the other guys on the roster.
No, I don't think they do. Because if you look at the.
You don't think you raised the bar for people?
I raised the bar, but I raised it for a certain type of person. All right, if you look, there's no correlation or very little between taking risks and being a success. The Rock, very talented, but he works hard. Don't get me wrong. I don't think people should misunderstand taking risks and working hard because they're not one and the same. But The Rock doesn't take a whole lot of risks. Triple H, when he finally blew his quadricep, was just taking a misstep. Triple H doesn't take a lot of risks.
You see, The Rock and Triple H don't necessarily have to take those risks because they have such enormous charisma with the microphone.
That's not,
but other guys who are trying to make their living through their wrestling, like the Hardy Boys you're talking about, those guys are expected to do it because they're not doing it with the microphone.
Okay, but I think you're wrong. I know it's your show, Michael, but I think you're wrong in that for The Rock and Triple H and Stone Cold, it's not just the charisma on the microphone, because charisma, you couldn't take the Ultimate Warrior and put him in main events anymore because the business has moved way past that. It's about hard work, and still in the main events about telling a story, hopefully coming off an appealing storyline. But for a guy like the Hardy Boys, that was their gimmick coming in. WWF doesn't assign guys gimmicks. They never will take someone aside and say, you need to start taking some more chances. In my case, it was, you need to take less chances because I was entertaining.
And they knew that you were valuable. There's nobody more valuable right now than The Rock. The Rock is a huge persona that goes way beyond wrestling. And that makes a lot of money for a lot of wrestlers, right? His fame that he brings into the ring is wonderful. What's it like, though, backstage? Because there is real heat that exists between wrestlers, and Vince even grooms that real heat. Is The Rock universally appreciated, or is there some jealousy?
He's universally hated. No, he's not. He's,
no, we'll drop it right there. I should have cut you off there.
You know what? The Rock is actually, I think, taking everything in consideration, how quickly it came and how huge he got, I think he handles it very well. There's no private Rock dressing room. He's still, a lot of guys will poke fun at him.
Does he owe you anything? Because you helped put him over. Especially you.
No, he owed me, I thought he owed me a visit to the dressing room.
Right, and this was after the I Quit match.
Right.
When I left the arena, I was troubled by the fact that one wrestler had not come in and checked on me. The Rock was not one of those. That from your book.
Right.
Has he ever come to you and made reference to it?
We talked it over for a good hour, at least.
Are you still pissed at him?
No. But I'll tell you what, I thought I wasn't, but I was in Washington, D.C., just a couple days ago, and a kid came up. He had both my books, wanted me to sign them, and I said, "Oh, are you enjoying them?" He goes, "Well, I haven't read them yet." I said, "Oh, why not?" Teasing. He goes, "Well, I'm reading The Rock's book," and it was like a knife, still like, just when I thought it was, because I take the book thing seriously, But as far as holding a grudge, I mean, the time we sat down, and because I told him, beyond the mat, Scotty Too Hotty clued me in that the Beyond the Mat DVD version was out with some extra commentary. That was real critical.
Okay. I want you to follow up on that later on in the show because we got to take care of our business, which is commercial. In wrestling, they usually say that red equals green. But for this guy, printer's ink equals green. The book is Foley is good and the real world is faker than wrestling. We'll be back in a minute to talk about when Foley wasn't so good.
Appreciate it.
This is a very weird time in wrestling, one that I don't think really has a direction or a sharp focus. 3 years ago, the WWF was all about attitude, pushing the limits. It belonged if it shocked people, but now the company is public. That can't happen anymore. I think it's a little bit flat, and I know so do you, Mick Foley. Has Vince painted himself in a corner? He made his mark by saying, we don't care what anyone thinks. Now he's got to care because the guy's got shareholders.
I think maybe we painted ourselves into a corner with that whole attitude thing, but I think it was more image. And once in a while, I really think, I don't know because I don't know the inner workings, I think once in a while they throw something out there like a little scene with Trish and Blackman just to shake people up so they go, oh, they are still the bad boys. If anything, I felt that our show and the company was kind of like a sheep in wolf's clothing in that so much of the appeal was innocent foolishness. And I know people could show clips and say, oh, is that innocent, or is that foolish? Of course, no. There's a lot of things we do that do push the envelope, but I thought a lot of the appeal, especially when I was the commissioner, was just nonsense. I mean, and I mean that in a positive way, but I mean like making references to 30-something and Christians sweating off an extra pound in a chicken suit that Kurt Angle had supposedly used in training for the '96 Olympics. I think that's very much overlooked.
But the real hardcore stuff, the stuff that I think made you guys, because in 1997-98, you guys were way behind WCW.
Right.
And Vince came on the show and said, I will reclaim the lead. And he did it because of showing the women's breasts. He did it by saying, suck it, and Degeneration X or Generation X and all that stuff. Now, you're going to interrupt me because you disagree?
Yeah, I think that was the image. But I think what it was superior storytelling. I think the WWF
But what stories were you guys telling, though? It was all about suck it.
No, it was all, look, Steve Austin never one time, as far as I know, said.
Yeah, but Steve Austin, he made his mark by giving the finger to his boss.
We were talking about suck it. I may have said that word twice because it was cute when I went out through DX. Undertaker never said suck it. You're giving all the credit to guys like Billy Gunn and X-Pac and the Road Dogg, who, with all due respect to them, are not really a big part of the show.
I understand, but it's not just the suck it, but suck it reflected an era. Would you not agree? In the WWF, and there were lots of stuff that came from that, including Sable's breasts, right? I mean, that had a lot to do with.
Well, the less we talk about Sable's breasts, the better. But I think if you want to talk about the deciding factor, it was Austin versus McMahon, which was classic good guy versus bad guy. And granted, Austin gave the finger, he drank the beer, but I really think he would have been every bit as popular without the beer, without the finger, because it was a character that hit home. The rough language, yeah, he used the rough language, but it's like a professor of mine was quoted in the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel by saying that, you know, television, not only did television not learn how to curse, not only did people not learn to curse from television, it's amazing how long it took television to talk like everybody else did.
So you in your book, you talk about the direction of wrestling. And I said off the topic that I thought that wrestling is a little bit flat right now. And I know that you agree with that, right?
Yes.
So where does the WWF go? Now in a climate that does not have competition the way it used to have.
Right.
And what's the motivation to take it to the next level and continue growing?
Well, I don't know about the motivation, but I can tell you why I think it was flat. I think Vince's direction and a lot of his energy was taken up by the XFL experiment. And I think somebody got it in their brain that the show had to be serious. And it's like one of the writers said to me, I was like it was like two political parties, the realists and the comics, you know, each wanting power when really it should be a combination of both. And I remember saying to one of the writers, you know, I'm saying, why are they making the show so serious? And his reaction, he said, they say that when we get lazy, we depend on what's easiest, comedy. And his reaction was, comedy is not easy. Bad comedy is easy. I think that the show stopped being fun, and that's why people left. That combined with the big blow-off, the match everybody wanted to see with Austin and Rock, and then Rock took off. And I'm not sure anybody bought the idea that Rock was gone because he was suspended indefinitely, because nobody in the history of sports entertainment has ever paid attention to a suspension.
One of the things about The Rock is that when he did our show and when he and I spent probably 2 hours together, I realized The Rock is actually The Rock.
Right.
What you see on camera on Raw Monday nights on TSN is exactly the same guy that you see in the green room. Let me read a quote from your book. If you're Robert De Niro on the set of Raging Bull and you feel like Jake LaMotta, if you're Mick Foley and you're about to be handcuffed and bludgeoned in the ring in front of your kids, it's probably not so good. Acting and comedy, I agree that there's certainly a combination here that's good, but for you, isn't it good when you start to believe your character?
Well, yeah, I think you left that out when I said if you're Jake and you think you're Jake LaMotta, it's actually a good thing. Yeah, and I'm not saying by any means that a physical style wasn't part of the appeal, but the thing is, I think you have to establish the characters, get people to like the characters, and then put them in peril. That's what all good stories do. That's what all good movies do.
Okay. Vince McMahon, does he believe that he's Mr. McMahon? Because you talk about him in the book, that you like Vince, but sometimes you don't like the way he comes across.
I think Vince believes he's Mr. McMahon every time a camera light comes on. And I asked him about that, and he asked me about the Costas show. He said, do you think I was working? And I said, I don't know. Were you? And he said, no. Vince, for some reason, and I think it's a defense mechanism, I'm sure he's going to like my psychoanalysis on a national show, but I think Vince, I mean, you start putting things in print about somebody being worse than Hannibal Lecter. I mean, this is not a side of Vince McMahon I've ever seen. I see Vince McMahon, I see him as probably the most giving billionaire out there. I mean, a guy willing to not only, let his reputation be messed around with and to do the thing where it looks like he's wet his pants and to let Chris Jericho make fun of a toupee that he doesn't even have. And not only that, but he lets people beat him up for the sake of his show. I think he's a good person, and I
do that. I do that, Mick. Yeah, bring it on. If you can get the butt out of that chair, which could be a factor. You announce your retirement on our show. Will you announce your comeback? We'll talk about Mick's plans when OTR returns. Stay with us. Now, you retired on this set paying us a wonderful compliment by saying, I'm all finished. So every time I see you in the ring, though, with the microphone, I'm thinking garbage pail is coming out and someone's going to beat you on the skull with it.
Right.
Let me ask you this. Do you have the urge to come back, and will it happen?
I don't have the urge to come back, but it probably will happen. I mean, just being realistic, to be our show ends up in a physical confrontation. That's the show. If we were to settle our differences as gentlemen, it wouldn't be much of a show to watch. We get involved. I've expressed my views that I think it's a healthy thing to create this kind of fantasy atmosphere for violence because people have it in their systems and always have since the dawn of mankind, the people, not the wrestler. And I think if I'm going to continue to be part of the show and a major part, which I wanted to be when I asked to come back, that it will have to eventually end up in the ring.
If this was any other sport, and I'll use the term applying to you.
Sure.
If it were any other sport or venue and you were unionized, there's no way you would be able to come back given the injuries that you've had. I mean, there's no way you could pass a physical to compete in most sports. Is it time in your sport to have someone looking over guys like Mick Foley and saying, hey, I got no interest in it. It's not in the best interest of Foley to come back?
I'll be honest, I never even thought about that, and that would
think about it now, Foley.
That would probably require more thought than I could give. If I just stood there scratching my chin, you might be out of ratings.
In hockey and in football and in baseball, all of those sports have guys that will look at you and say, you know what, you can't come back. Yet you can come back.
We do have people who look at it like that.
If you come back, is it your choice?
Yes, completely my choice.
That's what I'm saying.
Completely my choice.
Your
well,
choice.
Here's the difference between what we do in real sports is that Eric Lindros cannot walk up to the other guys and say, look, I've been having a tough time with this concussion thing, so maybe let me catch a couple, get a couple passes and put a couple goals in the net. I can do that. If I choose to wrestle, I can say, like I did for the last year and a half of my career, look, my wife doesn't want me getting hit in the head. Can you take it easy on my head out there? You know what I mean? And I can do that. And if I did have a match, it would be very clearly avoiding any trouble spots that I saw. And nobody, I want to make it clear, nobody has ever put pressure on me, even though, realistically speaking, I could help the WWF draw a fortune with a big match.
So I got to ask you this, because you retired saying, I don't want to be that guy.
Right.
I don't want to be that guy who takes it easy and that people around me don't take me as seriously. So why would you get back into it if that's the thing that forced you out in the first place?
Well, I'm not saying I'm going to, but if I did, it wouldn't be quite as pathetic looking to see.
Is your health better than it was? When you came onto our set, we have a riser here that's like 8 inches, and you had a tough time lifting your leg up high enough to do that.
Yeah, I feel a lot better. I mean, my knees are always going to be arthritic and painful, but I don't think that's any different than anybody in any sport, let alone I just went to my daughter's dance recital, and I'm watching the ballerinas, and I'm like, they're going to be paying for that in a few years. And with all due respect to ballet, they don't get their own action figures.
You know what? You're a very cool guy. I got to tell you. I'm just sitting here listening. And most of the interviews I do, I don't bother listening to the guests. I'm just thinking about my next question. Just kidding. But you, I'm listening to. You retired on our show. We're retiring our set on your show. We're moving over to CTV. This is our final show from our studios here. You're pretty honored about that. And we'll let you know about our comeback as well and when that will be. Let us know your thoughts on the show and all of that stuff. Hey, Mick, this is directed to you. When are you going to stop writing like Stephen King and start acting like one of his characters again? We miss you in the ring, buddy.
I think I'm doing the people, the audience, a better service by portraying a really innocent, doofy character that is beloved anyway.
All right, Michael, I hope you appreciate your job when a bingo caller like you gets to spend time with a guy like Mick, who has entertaining millions of people or entertained them. That is a privilege. And
is doofy a word?
I don't know if it is, but I'm just thinking of a bingo caller. Meanwhile, I don't think I'm a bingo caller, but if you want to call us up, get us on our website under the W, tsn.ca/OTR. There's our email, there's our fax number. Back with more OTR in a moment. What is Goofy? The rest of the authors that grace our set, Mick Foley. Foley is good and the real world is faker than wrestling. This is number 2 for you.
Right.
Available all across Canada?
Sure.
Sure.
No, it is. It is. And believe it or not, it's number 2 book right now. I'm hoping if we make a concerted effort, we can make it number 1 all across Canada.
So what happens a lot of times when guys write a second book, they don't have enough material.
Right.
You tell me why I should spend my money to buy this book.
Oh, because the first book, I forgot all kinds of things.
Too many chair shots to the head?
No. I remembered an unbelievable amount, but I was writing just whatever crossed my mind, made it on the book, which was part of the charm. This time I traveled for about 4 or 5 months with my notebook. I took notes, wrote down funny stories. Plus, I thought I had a great perspective on the last 15 months of my career. I had never read a good account of when an athlete or performer realizes he's at the end of his rope professionally. And to look back on a serious subject matter and to write about it with humor and candor, I think makes it a worthwhile read.
It is a worthwhile read because I did read it. And I have to say that one of the great experiences of my job is to sit with guys like Mick Foley and listen to your answers and realize this guy's given something to our audience. So for that, I appreciate it. And I say once again, the name of the book is Foley is Good and the Real World is Faker Than Wrestling. A total pleasure having Mick Foley on the show.
My pleasure also.
Off the Record with Michael Landsberg is brought to you by the Keg Steakhouse and Bar. For great steaks, good friends, see you tonight. Michael Landsberg's wardrobe supplied by Grafton & Company. Get it at Grafton.
It'll have people talking about it.
It's got to happen. Let's get that chicken sandwich.
Yvonne, you know I wasn't really yelling at you, don't you?
No?
Okay. You do know that?
And here's some advice.